All right, let's open up Dreamweaver and start working on our assignment. All right, so the first thing we need to do is to define our site. So let's go to the Site menu, choose New Site, type in the name of our site, which is going to be Chapter 4, and let's locate our home folder. So mine is on my desktop. Just make sure you identify your assignment folder. You could double click and then click on Chapter-04 and click Choose. Hit Save. And you should have your local files appear in the Files tab. And if it doesn't, then you didn't define your site properly and you have to go back and try it again. A few things that we want to do to set up. Let's just make sure that we reset our workspace to standard, and so that we're on the same page. It's a good idea to move this Assets tab up to the top here. And when you move your Assets tab, notice that in the Files tab, you have an Images folder. Okay, inside of there are some PNG files that we're going to be using in our site, and then a source folder which also has images. Some of these are PSD files, which are the original layered files for the PNGs that are in our images folder. If we have this Assets tab here, we can scroll through or click through our images and see little previews of them. So a few of them that we're going to be working with right away. One is called Argyle, actually Chevron-BG, and it looks like a little V. And we're going to be working with Diamond-BG, and notice how it's just a little gray diamond shape. And we're also going to be working with the Container-BG Gold. Okay, so notice how it's a very thin, meaning it's only 20 pixels deep. It's 960 pixels wide, which is the width of our website, and then it's 180 pixels for this little yellow area, and that'll be important in a few minutes. All right, so have the Assets tab ready. Make sure your Files tab shows your site with all the folders and files inside of it. What I would suggest is to go ahead and in CSS Designer, go to the CSS Designer tab and just drag this to the right so that you've got properties on the right hand side and you can have your list of selectors on the left. All right, in Files, notice that we've got similar to last time when we created an About, Contact, Images, Rates, Services folder. That's our site structure. And then we have an index.html that if we double click, it matches what we finished last week. It's a wireframe with some divs and the colors are applied to the divs. Let's just go to the design view right now and take a look. So we've got these divs in here. If I go to the split view and look in the code, and I click on a div, so let's say I click on the sidebar div, and let's see, scroll to where I have all the code for that div. So I've got the div tags, the opening and closing, and then I've got all the code and content enclosed within those. And when I highlight the, excuse me, when I click on the div, I have to click on the little edge here to highlight all the code that is associated with that div. All right, so that's what we completed last week, and this is where we're going from. So we're not actually going to be working in this file. We're going to be working in a file called prototype.html, and it's set up the same way. So it's got the same div tags, sidebar, container. Everything is within a container div. We've got a content, we've got a head or header area, and then we've got a footer. All right, but you'll notice that in the prototype.html we have some additional content, and those color coding the color-coded backgrounds are gone. We've got some area here indicating where advertising goes. All right, so we're going to be working in prototype.html. For now, let's just go to the design view, and we're going to go to the CSS Designer tab, and we need to what we need to do is to have our sidebar match the same gold or yellow color that's in our header and in our footer. And notice how the sidebar div only goes partially down the page, so it doesn't go all the way to the bottom, and behind it or below it is the white from our container, which is containing all of our div tags. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to insert an image that will create a yellow sidebar that will go beyond the border of our div and extend all the way down to the bottom of our page. So we're going to select the container selector, and we want to make sure that show set is unchecked. We're going to go to the background. We're going to click on this little browse folder. We're going to go to images, and we're going to find our container-bg-gold.png and click that to open, and that inserts into our page. And just to make sure that it goes all the way down to the bottom, let's choose repeat Y. So vertically, it's going to be repeating vertically in the Y axis. Okay, so we could preview this in a browser and see what it looks like. And save. Okay, so when we preview in a browser, we can see that our yellow sidebar goes all the way to the bottom of our page. And if we look in the textbook, we can get a sense of the type of image that we just placed. So as we looked at a little earlier, we have a 960 pixel wide image by 20 pixels high. The column area, the yellow area, is 180 pixels wide, which matches the width of our sidebar div. And since we set it to repeat in the y-axis, it's going to repeat all the way down our page, even though it's only 20 pixels high. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the body selector, and we're going to make sure we're in the background category. I'm already in that. We're going to zero out this background color. So there's a color in there. It's really not, we're not able to see it, but we just want to make sure there's nothing there. So let's just hit this remove CSS property trash can. And then we're going to insert a file. So let's go ahead and click browse. And we're going to choose that chevron image that we took a look at a little bit earlier. So chevron-bg, let's pick that, and let's choose that to repeat in the X and the Y axis. All right, so remember that chevron is just a single small file, a little v, and if we refresh our our page, our web browser page. We can see the chevron, that little V is repeating in the background. All right. Now, that's not the actual image that we want. Let's try that little diamond shape. So we had an image that looked like just a single diamond. Let's open that up, and let's also just make sure that it's set to repeat. Whoops. Make sure that this is bold. All right. And let's refresh our browser window. And now that single diamond image repeats. And so this is a way to make a background pattern with a very small image, so you don't have a gigantic image that takes a long time to load. All right. But again, that's not exactly what we want. So the tutorial is just taking us through some examples to show us the technique for creating a background pattern. What we're going to insert now is a gradient. So let's go back to Files. In our source folder, let's take a look at the gradient-bg.psd. Let me double click that. Now that'll open up in Photoshop. Okay, and we can see what this gradient looks like. All right, so let's take a look at the image size. The image is 2200 pixels wide by 100 high. It's only 644K. All right, so let's notice how that it's not even on both sides. So we're going to have to make some adjustments to the position to get this gradient exactly the way we want in our background when we insert it into Dreamweaver. So let's go back to Dreamweaver, and let's go to CSS Designer, go back to, we should still be in this body selector, go back to background, let's browse for our file, our gradient. There it is. Choose open. Let's see what happens when we reload our browser window. Okay, it's not quite showing up. So what we need to do is choose background position and set that to 50%. Whoops. Let's go ahead and just we can just scroll to 50. All right, and make sure that we repeat that in the y-axis. And let's take a look at our browser preview. So I'm going to reload, and now we have our gradient on either side of our content. All right, so let's just take a look at our code, how our code has changed. So let's go to the split view, and let's see if we can take a look at the CSS that's been inserted into our code. So we inserted or placed an image in our background, And so here's our container selector that we added the image to, and we can see that some code has been added. So our background image shows up here. It shows the attribute of repeating in the y-axis. Okay, so in the body selector, we have our background image inserted into our code and the attributes, the 50% position and the repeat in the y-axis. So just realize that anything that you do in the CSS Designer panel is going to be reflected in your code. So you could change some attributes in your code. So for example, if you wanted to change the background position to 30%, you could do it either in the CSS Designer panel, or you could go directly into your code and you could change that number to 30. So if I change my background position to 30 and I go back and reload my browser window, this is what I get. So I get a background gradient that doesn't look too nice. Okay? So let's change it back to 50. Okay, go back to our browser preview, and there it is.